Hi, I'm Ronnie Meek, and welcome to the Unbeliever's Bible Study, Session 18, Solomon and Some History. Next to David, Solomon is probably Israel's most famous king. He was David's son and immediate successor. Solomon started out very well. Early in his reign, God appeared to Solomon and told him to ask for anything. Now, this doesn't mean that God is a genie granting wishes, but because I'm pretty sure he knew what Solomon was going to ask for. Solomon asked for wisdom. And because he asked for wisdom instead of riches or the defeat of his enemies or long life, God gave him all of these things. His wisdom became renowned when two women appeared before him in a dispute over a baby. They apparently lived in the same house. They had a baby at the same time. And one morning they woke up and one of the babies was dead. And one of the moms said, well, when I woke up and discovered that my baby was dead, I looked closer and realized this wasn't my baby. She had switched babies after her baby had died. And so they were arguing about whose baby had died and to whom the living baby belonged. And it seemed like an impossible situation that Solomon called for a sword and said, cut the baby in two and give half to each woman, knowing that the one to whom the baby actually belonged would say, no, don't do that. Let her have the baby. And that's what happened. And Solomon said, okay, this is the mother. His wealth was also legendary. His base revenue each year in gold was over $3 billion in today's value. And that did not include taxes. That did not include gifts. He brought many of those and perks. He was visited. There was a legendary visit by the Queen of Sheba who came to hear Solomon's wisdom. His greatest accomplishment was building the temple for the Ark of the Covenant. His prayer of dedication was answered by the Lord, saying that Israel was going to go astray, but if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Solomon started well, but he did not end well. He had many wives, and most of them were foreign women, and he built places of worship for their foreign gods. He was led astray himself by his many wives, with the result that the Lord's favor left him, and the nation was thrown into chaos for centuries. The biblical history of the nation of Israel needs some explanation before we move on. Otherwise, things will get quite jumbled. First of all, during the reign of Solomon's son, Rehoboam, the kingdom split into two kingdoms. The people came to Rehoboam and said, Solomon made the load very heavy on us, but if you'll lighten the load, we'll serve you. And Rehoboam went to his advisors, and the older advisors said, if you'll do that, these people will be faithful to you. But the young buck said, no, make it harder on them. And so that was the answer that Rehoboam gave, and the kingdom split. The northern kingdom was composed of 10 tribes, and it was variously called the northern kingdom or Samaria, but primarily it was known as Israel. It did in fact have 10 of the tribes of Israel. It was ruled by several dynasties, but did not follow the house of David, and they did not worship in Jerusalem. They actually had golden calves that they worshiped in Israel, and the reason why those calves were there was political. These kings felt if they go down to Jerusalem to worship, they'll revert to the house of David. The southern kingdom was composed of two tribes, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. And it was called both the southern kingdom, and more prominently, it was called Judah. Except for a brief period, it was ruled by one dynasty, the house of David. And while they were by no means continually faithful to the Lord, they did worship in Jerusalem and have the temple and have the Levitical priest. And the northern kingdom started in rebellion and idolatry. But in the world's eyes, they were usually noted as the more important of the two because of their military might. However, they were no match for the great Middle Eastern empires. And in 711 BC, they fell to, well, let's see, maybe I should say BCE. I'm used to saying BC, but these days, rather than calling it before Christ, the secularists like to call it before Common Era, but we know why the split was there. It's because of the birth of Christ. Anyway, in 711 BCE, they fell to the Assyrian king Shalmaneser, and they were deported to the east. And while there were most certainly, some who returned over time, there is no official record of any organized return. And this has given rise to much speculation about what happened to the lost tribes of Israel. And sometimes people claim that they or their movement or their people are the lost tribes of Israel. Well, there are no lost tribes. God's always known where they were. The southern kingdom, though it had some periods of renewing their worship of the Lord, was also often guilty of worshiping other gods. The Lord was patient with Judah for the sake of David and his dynasty. But ultimately, they fell to the Neo-Babylonian Empire under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. And they too were deported. Though it was not a one-time event, there were actually 3 events. In 597, before Common Era, the royal family and the officers and craftsmen were deported to Babylon. There were several thousand of them. Then 11 years later, in 587 BCE, the remaining elite were deported and Jerusalem was destroyed. The walls were destroyed, the temple was destroyed, and only the poor were left to keep the land from becoming wild. And then about 4 years later, 582 BC, even the poor were taken because of rebellion that was fomented against those that, Nebuchadnezzar left a governor behind and he was murdered and there was a rebellion. Later, in 536 BCE, there was an official return from Babylon by decree of the Persian king Cyrus the Great. Now, the story of this period following David is recorded mainly in the 4 books of 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And both Kings and Chronicles cover the same period in both kingdoms, but there are some differences. The book of the Kings tends to focus more on the story of the northern kingdom. And these books also tend to present something of a newspaper account of events. Who, what, when, where. Sort of the way the world would look at things. Chronicles, on the other hand, tends to focus more on the southern kingdom. They present more of a godly view, often going deeper into matters of worship. In addition to just the facts, they often present the why to explain the facts from God's perspective. Well, I'm not going to talk about all the kings. That would be like reading War and Peace to you. I'm going to take a session for each kingdom, though, and I'm going to hit the highlights and often the lowlights as well. And next session will be the kingdom of Israel and 2 prophets. I hope you'll join me.